The board said his invention was worthless a single dad, licensed it for $20 M. 2 months later, 11 board members sat around a table on the 34th floor of the Vantage Group headquarters, and not one of them looked at the man standing at the door. Not once. He was wearing a denim jacket with a frayed left cuff, and he was holding a 6-year-old girl's hand with his right. The girl was holding a stuffed rabbit named Cog. Cog had one ear slightly longer than the other and a small ink stain on his left foot from a Tuesday afternoon that nobody outside that apartment would ever know about. The board had reviewed 47 applications for the Innovation Licensing Pitch Day. 46 of them arrived in tailored suits. Then there was Eli Marsh. The room laughed before he reached his seat. What happened in the next 40 minutes would cost them more than they had ever lost in a single quarter. Stay with this one. It earns every minute. The laughter came from the far end of the table. It was not loud. It was the contained kind, the kind that moves through a room like a current without anyone admitting they felt it. One of the board members, a man named Cameron Rourke, leaned toward the woman on his left and said something quiet. She pressed her lips together, looked at the ceiling, looked away. Eli did not react. He walked to the seat nearest the door and pulled it out. He set his canvas bag on the table, the kind with a broken zipper at the top, fixed with a small binder clip. He lifted the girl, whose name was Nora, onto the chair beside him. She tucked Cog under her arm without being asked. She had done that in every room she had ever walked into with her father. Every room, without being asked. At the head of the table sat Diana Wren. 41 days into her role as Chief Executive Officer of the Vantage Group, she had already cut 2 product lines, restructured the licensing division, and made it clear to the board that she was not interested in sympathy or sentiment. She was interested in revenue. She wore a charcoal blazer. Her pen was uncapped. She was looking at the door when Eli Marsh walked through it, and something in her expression shifted, not softened, not hardened. Shifted, like a calculation being revised. She said, quietly, that they would begin. Cameron Rourke was not a board member by title. He held the position of Senior Director of Strategic Acquisitions, which meant he sat in on every pitch and offered the kind of opinion that sounded like data, but was built from something older. He had been at Vantage for 11 years. He had a way of making a room feel like his room. He slid the application file toward Diana without looking at it. He had already read it. He already knew what he thought. He said the applicant had submitted a patent for a self-regulating thermal bridge system for residential and commercial insulation. He paused. He said the patent had been filed 3 years ago. He said the application described the inventor as, and he glanced at the page, just briefly, just long enough, a residential HVAC technician. Someone at the table exhaled. Eli said nothing. He was looking at the window. The city was gray and wide and far below. Nora adjusted Cog on her lap. She pressed one of Cog's ears flat with her thumb and then released it. She watched it spring back. Diana asked Eli to present. He opened his bag. He removed a thin folder, a USB drive, and a hand-drawn diagram on a folded piece of graph paper. He spread the diagram on the table without apology. It was precise. The lines were measured. The annotations were small and dense and organized in a system that was not immediately legible to the 11 people looking at it, but which was, to anyone who understood what they were looking at, something close to remarkable. Cameron Rourke glanced at it and then looked away. He said in the voice he used when he was certain that they had reviewed 32 thermal innovation submissions in the last fiscal year. He said the most promising of those had come from a team at a university in Zurich, backed by 6 years of material science research and a 7-figure development budget. He said what he was looking at now was a napkin drawing. Eli looked at the diagram. Then he looked at Cameron Rourke. He said it was graph paper, not a napkin. Nobody laughed. Not even the ones who had been laughing before. The graph paper diagram had taken 14 months to produce in that form. The actual system it described had taken 3 years before that. And before that, before the sketches and the heat loss calculations and the weekend mornings at the kitchen table with textbooks checked out from the county library, there was a woman named Patrice and a small house with a single-pane windows and 2 winters that had been expensive in ways that had nothing to do with money. Patrice had died on a Wednesday. February. Nora had been 3 years old. She still did not fully understand what Wednesday meant or what February meant, but she understood, in the way that young children understand things that have not yet been put into words, that Wednesday was a before and February was an after, and that the stuffed rabbit named Cog had been present for both. Patrice had given Nora the rabbit in the hospital. It had been purchased from the gift shop on the first floor, and the nurse had pressed it into the rabbit's paw, a small card that said, "Get well soon," which was no longer relevant, but which Nora had kept folded inside Cog's stitched pocket for 3 years, because her father had told her it was something to keep. Eli had gone back to work 4 days after the funeral. He had no choice. He had a daughter and a mortgage and a truck with a cracked manifold, and the world had not paused for him and he had not asked it to. He serviced HVAC units across 3 counties. He showed up on time. He fixed what was broken. He handed invoices to homeowners who apologized for the mess in the front hallway, and he told them not to worry about it, and he meant it. He started the thermal bridge work on a Tuesday evening while Nora slept. He had been called to a school building the previous week, a retrofit project, and had noticed a problem in the framing that was creating a cold transfer path so severe that the heating system was essentially fighting itself. The engineer on site had noted it in the report and marked it as a structural limitation. Acceptable loss. Eli had stood in that hallway for 4 minutes and seen something else entirely. The idea was not complex. The principles were understood. But the execution, the specific geometry of the bridging element, the material interface, the way the thermal mass was distributed across the structural boundary, that was the thing nobody had landed. He had seen 6 patents in the space. He had read all 6. None of them had solved the interface problem. He solved it on graph paper at his kitchen table with a mechanical pencil that Patrice had given him for his birthday 1 year before Nora was born. The pencil still worked. He still used it. It was the only one he used. He filed the patent on a Thursday morning before his first service call. The application cost $470, which he paid with the money he had set aside for a new water heater. He fixed the old one himself. He always fixed things himself. Nora had watched him work, on and off, for all 14 months of the detailed drawings. She understood that the papers were important. She understood that Cog was allowed on the table as long as he did not sit on the papers. These were the rules. She followed them without being asked twice. She told him, once, that Cog thought the drawings looked like maps of a city no one had built yet. Eli had looked at the drawings for a moment. He said Cog might be right. He did not tell her about the rejection letters. There had been 4. 2 from manufacturing partners, 1 from an industry group, 1 from a firm that had returned his materials with a form letter explaining that the submission did not meet their minimum criteria for institutional review. He had put those in a folder in the cabinet under the kitchen sink. He had not looked at them again. He knew what was in them. The 5th contact had been from Vantage Group's Open Innovation Portal. He had submitted online on a Thursday night at 11:47, after Nora was asleep and Cog was tucked in beside her. He had sat at the table in the kitchen for a while after hitting submit. He did not know what he had expected to feel. He felt quiet. He turned off the light and went to bed. The invitation to pitch had arrived 6 weeks later. He had taken Nora to school that morning, come home, read the email twice, and then gone to his service calls. He had not told anyone. There was no one to tell. He ironed the denim jacket the night before the pitch. Nora watched him do it with the kind of focused attention she usually reserved for things she found genuinely mysterious. She asked why he was ironing the jacket. He said because it was a meeting. She said most meetings her teacher had, the people wore different kinds of jackets. He said he knew. She looked at Cog. Cog offered no opinion. She looked back at her father and told him the jacket looked good. He said thank you. She said Cog agreed. He had not planned to bring her. His neighbor, a woman named Ruth, who was 71 and watched Nora on the days his schedule ran long, had called that morning to say her hip was making the stairs difficult. He had said it was fine. He had packed Nora's backpack with a coloring book, 2 granola bars, and Cog, and he had told her they were going to a meeting together. She had said, okay. She had said she would be quiet. He had told her she didn't have to be. She had said she would anyway. The board had a lunch break scheduled at 12:30. By 12:17, Cameron Rourke had closed the folder and made clear, in the way he made things clear, not by raising his voice, but by leaning back, by removing his glasses, by performing certainty with his posture that the submission did not merit a licensing discussion. He said the patent covered a method, not a product. He said the method had not been independently tested. He said the material's costs, based on a preliminary review, would make it non-competitive against existing solutions at scale. He said there was no institutional backing, no published research, and no evidence of industry engagement. He said it kindly. That was the particular skill he had, making dismissal sound like wisdom. Diana was watching Eli. She had been watching him for most of the presentation. Not because she disagreed with Cameron, she did not know enough yet to disagree, but because there was something in the way he stood, not defiant, not nervous. He stood the way someone stands when they already know the outcome and have decided to be present for it anyway. She said she had a question. She asked Eli if the system had been installed anywhere. He said yes. She asked where. He said 17 installations, residential and light commercial, 3 counties. He reached into the canvas bag and removed a second folder. He placed it on the table. He said it contained measured performance data from all 17 sites, including pre-installation baseline readings, post-installation thermal imaging, and energy cost comparisons across 2 full heating seasons. He said the average reduction in heat loss at the bridge point was 61%. He said in 2 of the installations, both older homes with poor original insulation, the tenants had reduced their heating costs by more than 1/3 in the first winter alone. The room was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of nothing happening, the quiet of a room where something has shifted and no one has yet decided how to respond. Cameron Rourke said 17 residential installations did not constitute a scalable proof of concept. He said it with the same measured authority, but there was something different in the word choice. Something that arrived a half-second later than usual. Nora, who had been coloring in her book without looking up, reached over and placed Cog on the table beside Eli's folder. Not on the papers. Beside them. She looked at her father's face for a moment and then looked back at her book. One of the board members, a woman at the far end of the table named Harriet Blake, who had been quiet for the entire meeting, picked up the performance data folder. She opened it to the thermal imaging section. She looked at one page. She looked at another. She did not say anything. She turned a third page. Cameron Rourke said they would take the lunch break as scheduled and reconvene. Eli and Nora ate their granola bars in the hallway on the 34th floor. There were chairs along the wall, the kind that looked expensive but were not comfortable, and Nora sat in one with Cog on her lap and a granola bar in each hand. She offered one to Eli. He took it. She said Cog wanted one too. He told her Cog could share hers. She informed him gravely that Cog was more of a listener than an eater. He said that was a good quality to have. She asked if the meeting had gone okay. He said he thought so. She looked down at Cog. She pressed his good ear flat and let it spring back again. She said Cog thought it was going to be fine. She said Cog was almost always right about these things. He looked at her for a moment. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere below them, 34 floors below them, the city continued. He said he knew. What he did not know, sitting in that hallway with a granola bar and his daughter's rabbit, was that Harriet Blake had not gone to lunch. She was sitting at the conference table with the performance data folder open in front of her, and she had made 3 phone calls in 20 minutes. One to a civil engineering firm she had worked with on a school district retrofit project, one to a materials scientist at a university, 2 states away, and one to a retired building inspector she had known for 20 years. She had read the data to all 3 of them. She had asked all 3 of them the same question. All 3 of them had given her the same answer. She was still on the phone when Cameron Rourke came back from lunch. The afternoon session began at 1:45. Diana had returned to her seat with her pen uncapped. Cameron Rourke had returned with the same posture he had left with. The board members filed back in. Eli and Nora returned from the hallway. Nora brought Cog back to her chair and set him upright against the edge of the table so he could see the room. Harriet Blake said she had a few things she wanted to raise before they continued. Cameron Rourke said the agenda had the second pitch scheduled to begin at 2. Harriet Blake said this would not take long. She opened the performance data folder. She said she had spoken during the lunch break with 3 people she trusted in the field of thermal building science. She said she had read them portions of the data. She said all 3 had asked the same question, whether the methodology had been peer-reviewed, because if it had not, they would like to be involved in reviewing it. She said the specific framing of the bridge element, and here she used language that made Cameron Rourke's expression shift by a fraction, addressed a problem that the industry had been trying to solve for more than a decade. She said the solution in the Marsh patent was not the same as any of the 6 existing approaches in the space. She said it was structurally different. She looked at Cameron Rourke when she said that. She said it in the same flat voice he used when he was presenting certainty. She had learned that voice from watching him. He said he had noted the approach was novel, but that novelty did not equal commercial viability. She said she was aware of that. She said she was flagging the technical response from people she trusted because she thought the board should have it before they voted. She was not advocating for a position. She was providing information. Diana had not uncapped her pen yet. She was looking at Eli. She asked him a question she had not asked before. She asked who had helped him develop the system. He said, no one. She said, no one. He said his daughter had helped him with the drawings occasionally, but mainly in a supervisory role. Nora looked up from her coloring book. Someone at the table made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Diana asked if anyone had reviewed the methodology before he filed. He said he had consulted 3 published papers in materials science and 1 archived engineering report from a Canadian building standards body. He cited all 4 from memory. The titles, the authors, the year of publication. He did not check notes. He looked at the table when he said them. Harriet Blake wrote something down. Cameron Rourke was very still. The afternoon was moving in a direction he had not arranged for, and he was not yet sure where the problem had entered. He had reviewed the submission himself. He had marked it as non-viable. He had written the summary that went to Diana. He had been careful. He had been thorough. But there was something in the folder, something he had not looked at closely enough, and he needed to understand what Harriet Blake had found before the afternoon went any further in this direction. He said he wanted to raise a process concern. He said the purpose of the pitch session was to evaluate commercialization potential, not to conduct technical review. He said Vantage had internal protocols for the latter. Diana said that was correct. She said they could note the technical questions for the assessment team. She said she had a few more questions for the applicant. She asked Eli if he had received any prior expressions of interest in the patent. He said he had. She asked from whom. He reached into his bag and removed the 3rd folder. He placed it on the table. He said it contained a letter of intent from Meridian Construction Partners, signed 14 days ago, expressing preliminary interest in an exclusive regional licensing arrangement. He said the letter included a preliminary valuation range. He said he had not moved forward with it because the terms required exclusivity in a way that he did not think served the long-term utility of the method. He said he had also received a call, 3 weeks prior, from an architectural firm in the Netherlands. He said the call had been informal and had not resulted in documentation. But he mentioned it because the question had been asked. The room was very quiet again. Cameron Rourke opened his mouth. Diana said, without looking at him, that she wanted to finish. She looked at Eli. She asked what he was looking for from Vantage. He said a non-exclusive licensing arrangement. He said he wanted the method to be used. He said he was not interested in a buyout. He said he wanted to be able to continue improving the system and that any agreement would need to allow for ongoing patent development. She asked why he had come to Vantage. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said Vantage had the distribution network to put the method into commercial construction at a scale that would matter. He said he did not have that. He said the method worked. He said he could prove it worked. He said he needed a partner with reach. He said it in the same flat voice he had used for everything else. No ask in it, no performance, just the information delivered plainly, the way he delivered all information. Nora was not coloring anymore. She was looking at her father. What happened next did not happen in the conference room. It happened in Cameron Rourke's office on the 32nd floor, 2 hours after the session adjourned. Harriet Blake had not gone to her car. She had gone to the records archive on the 31st floor with her badge and a specific question that had been forming since the lunch break. The question was about the prior submissions log for the innovation portal specifically, whether any submissions with overlapping subject matter had been received in the previous 18 months. The log was not confidential. Board members had access. She had simply never had reason to look before. There had been one, filed 11 months ago. A company called Stratum Material Systems, based in Denver. The submission had described a thermal bridge mitigation method for residential framing. It had been reviewed and flagged as commercially promising by Cameron Rourke personally. It had been fast-tracked to preliminary licensing discussions. Those discussions had stalled. The file was marked as inactive. Harriet Blake pulled the Stratum submission. She pulled the Marsh application. She set them side by side on the archive table. She was there for 40 minutes. When she came back upstairs, she did not go to her car. She went to Diana Wren's office. She brought both folders. She said there was something Diana needed to see. The core methodology in the Stratum submission, the specific framing geometry, the material interface logic, the distribution approach was filed 4 months after Eli Marsh had submitted his initial patent application. The Stratum document did not cite the Marsh patent. It used different language, different variable names. The diagrams were reoriented, but the underlying method, when you set the two documents side by side and read the technical specifications in sequence, was not different in any way that the law would recognize as different. What it was a copy. Diana asked who held the Stratum account at Vantage. Harriet told her. Diana was quiet for a long time. She looked at the folders. She looked at the window. She looked at her pen on the desk. She asked Harriet to get legal. She asked her to get Eli Marsh's contact information from the reception log. Then she asked, almost to herself, whether Rourke had known about the Marsh application when he fast-tracked Stratum. Harriet said the timestamps made it difficult to argue otherwise. Eli was in the parking garage on level 2 when his phone rang. He had buckled Nora into the back seat and was standing beside the truck. Nora had Cog pressed against the window, which was still up, and was making Cog look at the concrete ceiling of the garage with the expression of a rabbit who was considering the architecture. Eli answered the call. It was Diana Wren's executive assistant. She said Miss Wren would like to request that Mr. Marsh return to the building, if he was still available. She said it was important. He looked through the window at Nora. She lowered Cog from the glass and looked back at him. He said he could come back. He told Nora they needed to go upstairs again. She said, okay. She asked if Cog could ride the elevator this time, instead of being in her bag. He said Cog could ride the elevator. She said good. She said Cog had been curious about the buttons. They were taken to a smaller room on the 32nd floor. Diana was there, and Harriet Blake, and a man from legal named Seth Owens, who had thin-framed glasses and a yellow notepad that was already half filled with writing. Diana stood when Eli walked in. She looked at Nora. She looked at Cog. She said she wanted to show Eli something. She said she needed to know if he had ever seen it before. She placed the Stratum submission on the table in front of him. He looked at it. He turned to the second page. He turned to the third. He read quietly for a long time. Then he reached into the canvas bag and removed his original patent application, the one he had submitted to the portal, with the graph paper diagram paper-clipped to the inside cover, and set it beside the Stratum document. He said, without inflection, that he had not seen the Stratum document before. He said he did not need to read further to know what had happened. Seth Owens asked how he could be certain. Eli pointed to the diagram in the Stratum document, specifically to the annotation notation system in the lower right corner of the main schematic. He said that notation system was not standard. He had developed it himself because the standard system had insufficient precision for what he was specifying. He said there were 4 elements in the Stratum diagram that used identical notation to his own. He said those elements appeared on the graph paper in the original application, which was filed 4 months before the Stratum submission date. He turned to the page in his application that showed the graph paper diagram. He placed it beside the Stratum page. Harriet Blake leaned forward. She looked at both pages for a long time. Seth Owens wrote something on the notepad. He did not look up when he asked if Eli had any additional documentation, original drafts, dated files, working materials. Eli said he had the original notebooks. He said he had every page in sequence from the first sketch to the final patent drawings. He said the notebooks were dated in his own hand and could be verified against his schedule records, which he had kept digitally since the year Nora was born, because his accountant had required it for self-employment documentation. Seth Owens wrote more. He capped his pen. He uncapped it again. He looked at Diana. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the canvas bag, at the binder clip holding the zipper closed, at the mechanical pencil resting on the table beside the graph paper. She said she needed to make some calls. She asked Eli if he could stay in the building for another hour. He looked at Nora. Nora looked at Cog. Cog maintained his characteristic stillness. He said they could stay. Cameron Rourke was escorted from the building at 4:51 in the afternoon by 2 members of the facilities team and Seth Owens. He said nothing in the elevator. He carried his briefcase and his overcoat. He did not look at the lobby receptionist when he passed. He had worked at Vantage for 11 years, and he walked out of it in under 3 minutes. The Stratum account was frozen pending a full audit. Seth Owens made 3 calls before 5 o'clock. 1 to outside counsel, 1 to the patent office, 1 to a forensic document firm the company kept on retainer for exactly the kind of situation that no one at Vantage had expected to encounter that Tuesday. None of them had expected it to be a Tuesday. Diana Wren came into the small room at 6:12 in the evening. Nora had fallen asleep in the chair with Cog tucked under her chin. She had used her coloring book as a pillow, face down, with a half-finished drawing of what appeared to be a rabbit standing in front of a tall building. Eli was sitting beside her with his hands folded on the table, not looking at his phone, not looking at the folders, looking at the window. Diana sat down across from him. She said she owed him an apology. She said it before she said anything else, before she explained or contextualized or qualified. She said she owed him a specific apology. She said she had dismissed his application before she had read it herself. She said she had relied on a summary prepared by someone who had a financial interest in suppressing it. She said she had made an assumption, in the first moment she saw him, about the nature of what he had brought into the room. She said that assumption was wrong. She said it had been wrong in a way that had consequences, and she would not pretend otherwise. She said she was wrong, not that she had made a mistake, not that she was sorry he had felt underestimated. She said she had been wrong, and she named the specific way she had been wrong, and she did not look away when she said it. Eli looked at her. He said he appreciated that. He said nothing else. She said she would like to discuss terms. She said Vantage would like to enter into a non-exclusive licensing agreement for the Marsh Thermal Bridge system. She said the preliminary valuation, based on the commercial construction market data her team had run during the afternoon, suggested a licensing structure that would generate between $18 and $22 million in royalty revenue over the first 5 years, based on conservative penetration estimates. She said that was before international markets, which her team had already flagged as significant. She said the agreement would include an ongoing development clause, allowing Eli to continue improving the system and licensing improvements through a joint structure that he would co-own. She said Vantage would also be formally acknowledging the prior art provenance in all commercial materials. She said his name would be on the method. She said that was not optional in the agreement, it was foundational. She slid a 1-page preliminary term sheet across the table. Eli looked at it. He read it once. He turned it over and looked at the back, which was blank. He turned it face up again. He said he would need his own counsel to review the full agreement. She said, of course. He said he had one condition that was not negotiable. She said she was listening. He said the agreement could not restrict his ability to license the improvements to nonprofit housing organizations and public school districts at cost. He said that was not a small carve-out. He wanted it built into the structure. He said the reason he had developed the method in the first place was a school building, and he did not want the commercial licensing to price out the institutions that needed it most. Diana looked at him. She looked at the term sheet. She looked at the mechanical pencil on the table beside the graph paper. She said she did not see a problem with that. He said then they had something to discuss with counsel. She said yes. The room was quiet for a moment. Nora made a small sound in her sleep. She shifted in the chair. Cog slipped from under her chin, and she caught him in her sleep, without waking, and pulled him back to her chest with the automatic certainty of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Diana watched her do it. Then she looked at Eli. She said quietly. That his daughter, what was her name? He said Nora. She said Nora had very good instincts about rooms. He said she did. He said she got that from her mother. Diana looked at the table. Then she looked up again. She said she was sorry for that, too, the loss. She said it simply. One sentence. No performance. He said thank you. He looked at Nora sleeping in the chair with Cog pressed against her ribs, and his expression was the kind of expression that doesn't have a name exactly. Something between the weight of a thing and the fact that you carry it anyway. At 7:43 in the evening, Eli carried Nora out of the building. She was mostly awake, which meant she was upright but not yet functional. Cog was in her arms with his feet dangling. She rested her head on Eli's shoulder and watched the lobby slide past them. Outside, the city was doing what cities do at evening, moving, settling, the light going orange on the west-facing buildings, and the traffic finding its way toward home. Eli's truck was in the garage on level 2. He walked toward the entrance. Nora said, into his shoulder, her voice slow with the particular gravity of children half awake. Dad. Ah. Did the meeting go okay? He said he thought so. She said Cog thought so too. He said that was good. He said Cog had good instincts. She considered this for a moment. She said, Cog says the building was very tall. She said, he says next time he wants to see it from outside. Eli said they could do that. She was quiet then. He walked. The entrance to the parking garage was lit with fluorescent light that made the concrete look pale and the shadows dark. And his footsteps had the particular echo of a closed-in space, and Nora's breathing against his shoulder had the particular rhythm of a child who is almost asleep again. And in his jacket pocket was the folded term sheet with his name on the top line, and in his bag were the notebooks with every dated page, and the graph paper diagram, and the mechanical pencil, and he walked. She said, without opening her eyes, Dad. He said, yeah. She said, I think Mom would have liked the drawings. He did not say anything for a moment. He pushed through the door into the garage. The echo changed. His footsteps found the sound of a different space. He said, I think so too, buddy. She adjusted Cog against her ribs. She settled more fully into his shoulder. She did not say anything else. He found the truck. He opened the door. He lifted her in and buckled her without waking her, and Cog went beside her without instruction, and the drive home took 37 minutes, and he did not turn on the radio.